Alright, so if you are choosing between the Poco X3 Pro versus the LG V60, it's a pretty interesting choice because you do have sort of interesting trade-offs with these two phones. Now, the Poco is cheaper at 300 bucks, V60 400. I'll have those links down below. So let's go ahead and get started. So hardware, I think the V60 pretty much easily takes the cake here. It's a glass and metal device. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. It's, you know, it's built like a tank pretty much. A very big device. Both of these are very big phones. Power button, volume rockers, Google Assistant button down below, USB-C, headphone jack with a quad DAC, stereo speakers on board. I think the design looks really good and clean on the V60. On the Poco, you have a more out there design, and it's also a plastic build, so it just doesn't feel as premium when you hold it as the V60. You know, obviously you're not going to beat glass and metal. Very interesting camera module design on here too as well. We have a power button, the fingerprint scanner, which acts as the power button, which is something I always loved about these phones. You do have on here USB-C, headphone jack, no quad DAC, and then stereo speakers on here. So I think for hardware, I think, you know, easily takes it. Oh, the Poco also does have IP53 splash proof, but it's not, you know, anywhere as good as, you know, an actual IP68 rating. So let's talk about screen quality, because I think this is pretty interesting depending on what you're looking for. So on the Poco, we have an IPS display. It's a 6.7 inch display here, 1080p 395 for the PPI, but it's 120 hertz. That means it's extremely smooth when scrolling and swiping through just your applications. It is a very smooth little screen, so that is one thing that I've noticed just navigating through the Poco. It's always giving a, you know, smooth scrolling experience. But it is an IPS panel on here. You do have a punch hole in the middle, and it does look pretty good. Colors are pretty decent on here as well. But on the V60, and here's sort of like the interesting thing, you have a 6.8 inch display, but it's a POLED display at HDR10 Plus at 6.8 inches. So it's a slightly bigger display, 1080p 395 for the PPI. So there's no punch hole. It just has the water drop notch, which I think a lot of people prefer. But you see the trade-off. The V60's display quality is better than the Poco's IPS display. It does look better color-wise, and it also gets fairly brighter, a little bit brighter as well. But like I said, those are like the main trade-offs with these two phones. So you got 120 hertz. You have that smoothness with just scrolling, and then you have no 120 hertz on the V60. But you also have the POLED display, which is giving you much better colors and stuff like that. And so I think that just comes down to personal preference as well. And also do note that you do have a dual display functionality on the V60, which you do not have on the Poco. So you can basically turn the V60 into two smartphones, which is pretty cool. Now let's talk about software. You have Android 11 on the V60, Android 11 on the Poco, MIUI 12. It really comes down to personal preference here. I prefer the Android 11 on the V60. I think it's overall just a cleaner experience. It's very fast, and it gives you sort of a stock Android vibe too, as you can see. And you know, on the Poco, it definitely gives you a lot of extra features and stuff, a lot of customization stuff that you can play around with. But as far as navigating, these are both very smooth operating systems or skins on here, so I have no issues with that. So let's go ahead and talk about the specs. So on the V60, Snapdragon 865, Adreno 650, micro SD support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 8 gigs of RAM. So on the Poco, you also have the Snapdragon 860, Adreno 640, micro SD support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 6 gigs of RAM. So the V60, the base model, is a bit more powerful than the Poco. For sure, you have a stronger chip on the V60, but not by a much. So, you know, if we go into Geekbench, let's actually see what the scores are. Yeah, so you can see we actually, well, that's actually a pretty decent score change here. So let's go ahead and get a quick speed test here. They both perform really well, but as you can see, the V60 is going to beat the Poco in benchmarks. But as you can see, they're pretty much tied in terms of actually opening up applications. I suspect the V60 should be a little bit faster, but not too much faster. And we actually got the Poco in there first. But I do think when it comes to like raw power, those benchmarks really kick in on the V60 if you're gaming. But other than that, an 860 versus 865, you're not going to notice a massive difference here. You can see the Poco still pretty fast. Oh, no, that was tied. So you can see they're pretty much tied as far as like speed is concerned. V60. Now, as far as your PUBG settings, they should be pretty much the same here. As you can see, extreme, all the way on HDR. You have Ultra HD. And then on the Poco, you'll pretty much have the same settings. You can see extreme. And then you have Ultra HD as well. So your gaming experience, again, is going to be the same. But again, the V60 benchmarks is a little bit better. So down the line, I think as time goes on, the V60 will slightly outperform the Poco. But as far as like right now, they both pretty much are gaming the same. So if you do want to use these as gaming phones, they're excellent. The Poco, I guess, does have that advantage at having that 120 hertz display. So they have a ton of games in the Play Store that's compatible with that 120 hertz. But these are both going to be excellent gaming devices. And also another perk of the V60 is, again, that dual screen. You can use it as a remote controller or something like that. But as far as just playing PUBG, pretty much playing any game, these two phones are going to perform really well. Now, both these phones have NFC, and the Poco actually has an infrared port, so you can use it as a remote controller, which is pretty cool. The V60 does have that quad DAC on here, so when you plug in your audio or plug in your headphones, you'll get some excellent audio quality with this phone. You don't have that on the Poco. And now I want to talk about getting into the phone here. So with the V60, they only give you one option, and that option is the fingerprint scanner, which works fine, but they took away face unlock, which I never really liked. So I always like having two options, so I'm not sure why they did that. On the Poco, you have your physical fingerprint scanner, and you also have face unlock. Now, it comes down to what you like. Some people like the more sort of futuristic feeling of the in-display fingerprint sensor, but you do have more options on the Poco, so I think it kind of wins in that department, just having more options to me. So I don't know why they took away face unlock, but they did. Check out these speakers, starting with the V60 max volume. Yeah, so the V60 speaker is still really unmatched. It's still extremely loud. It's still hitting way harder than the Poco as far as bass and overall just loudness. But the Poco is really good. I've said that to a lot of in my comparisons. I've said that a lot. The Poco X3 Pro does have very good speakers. Yeah, but it's not even really close to the V60 as far as like loudness and bass quality. The V60 is just really booming here. Alright, so I do want to give my thoughts on the image quality, and if you want a straightforward answer, I do think the V60 does take better photos than the Poco X3 Pro. So on the V60, you do have a triple camera setup, 64 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide, 0.3 depth sensor in 8K video, a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K video. So as you can see, it takes really good pictures, very good natural color, pretty good detail, pretty good selfie camera. You get 8K video, which the Poco cannot do, and you get 4K video on the front, which the Poco cannot do. So as you can see, it takes great photos. I think it's pretty easy where you see the price difference here. But the Poco does have some things that the V60 does not. So you have a quad camera setup, 48 megapixel standard, 8 megapixel ultra wide. And on the Poco, you actually have a 2 megapixel macro sensor, so you can get really close in on shots, and a 2 megapixel depth, 4K video, 20 megapixel selfie, 1080p on the front. And it takes great photos. I think for a $300 phone, I would not say ever that this takes bad photos at all. Compared to the V60, I don't think it's just as good. But as you can see, for what it is, pretty good image quality. So I really have no complaints. And like I said, you get that quad camera set up, so the macro camera is always really fun to play with. You get pretty good image processing on here, good detail, good depth of field. So overall, great cameras for both. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about battery life here. So you have two very big batteries on both these phones. The V60, you have a 5,000 milliamp battery with wireless charging, and on the Poco, you have a 5,160 milliamp battery with 33 watt fast charging, but there's no wireless charging on the Poco. So you have to kind of make that decision if you really care about wireless charging or not. The charging on the Poco is pretty fast at 33 watts. As far as battery life, they pretty much almost have the same battery size. The Poco just has a slightly bigger battery. Now, honestly, you know, you're getting around the same battery life if you're not using the 5G on the V60, and that's also another thing. The Poco does not have 5G. You know, you're getting the same battery life, honestly. So both these phones are really going to be a beast when it comes to battery life because they last all day. But again, it varies. If you get a dual screen case with the V60, the battery isn't going to be as great because you're powering two screens. So that is pretty much it. What do you guys think, the V60 versus the Poco? Be sure to let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.